Welcome tonight for this very special lecture, which in the sequence of lectures that we're having here at Sprechen über Architektur is an Ausreißer, as we say, a very international lecture by AMID.CERO9. We are very happy to have you here. And I will shortly introduce you for the people who are not so familiar with your work, but I will try to leave most of the time to you and to the lecture we will be seeing. So AMID.CERO9 is Cristina Diaz Moreno and Efren Garcia Grinda. They founded their practice in 1997 when it was still called, as far as I remember, CERO9. And I hope perhaps you can later explain us how the AMID came about, because I think it is very important to your work, this amidness being embedded in things. Why are you here? You're here because you're teaching in Vienna, and we took this as an opportunity to invite you and also to share your work with us, people living and working in Vienna, who are not privileged enough to teach and learn with you at the Angewandte, where AMID.CERO9 have taken up the place of Sahadit and Katsuya Sejima. I'm now teaching in the Architecture Studio 1, which of course came after a long career in teaching, actually from the beginning. I think from the first years you were always teaching in Madrid, also in Harvard, in Princeton, at the Architectural Association in London, and also at the Akademie der Bildenden Künste in Vienna. So Vienna is also a place that appears again and again. I think this is very interesting. And I think it shows that there are certain connections between your work and interests that happen here in Vienna, and I think it's not an accident. It's not by chance that you are here right now. If any one of you is interested in more about the work of AMID.CERO9, I can only recommend to get the El Croquis number 184, where there are a lot of interesting texts and beautiful drawings and images of their work. So just for me personally, I would like to go back to this to the year 2001 when I first saw your work. And I think it's also nice to remember that it was a Europan project that brought you here. And Europan has been very important for my work and also, of course, for Bernd Fly. And it was a very beautiful project that you did. I think it was for Finland. It brought, that time in Europan, brought a lot of ideas from Spain to other parts of Europe. And I think this interchange was very influential in a number of ways. And we have, since then, also always collaborated with people from Spain. And I think this influence in the very precise and beautiful technique of drawing things, putting a lot of imagination into the drawings, much more than just representing a building, I think is something that really started there in a way and has been highly influential also for our work. And so I'm very interested to see where you are now and how you yourself tell the story.
Remember to bring a bit of water later. Sorry. So welcome and thank you for coming in such a nice weather. That is a nice opportunity to be enjoying in the weather. So thank you for coming. Hopefully you will find things that make this at least interesting for you. Thank you, Lina, for inviting and for inviting us and for insisting, because we were like hesitating. We have many things to do always, so we were hesitating, but it is a great opportunity. And thank you to the CB Architekten, because it's also an opportunity to be in contact with other realms of our field. That is not only the academia or the students, so this is a very nice encounter. Also very nice because it's the first physical lecture since 2020, no? More than 2 years ago. So first moment when we see people, audiences, not screens.
Not that many people.
Yeah, but anyway,
yeah,
it's
fantastic.
a pleasure.
Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure, and it's also a pleasure that is kind of a more personal meeting.
Yeah.
No? It's
Yeah.
very, very nice. So thank you for coming. Also, we have in here Susa Peter, that has been collaborating with us in some of the projects that we will see today. She is also teaching with us. Our team is in here, our fan club is in here, the team at the Angevante, all the team is in here. Susa is part of the team. And well, we will be showing some project that she has been doing since COVID. We have been working together, doing competitions, and she's also part of one of the projects that you will see today. And well, this name, on diversity of beings, past and cosmographies. Normally our lectures normally are an amalgam of projects, competitions, ideas, concepts, and we are always talking about a variety of things to somehow develop or deliver our way of working, more than many times going through all the projects, like giving all kind of details. And we normally also talk about how time in architecture, and of course you know that projects are going in parallel, are having intersections among them, and well, this is happening also in all the work that we do. I guess that this is something shared, of course. But also we want to talk about design as a form of knowledge, because also our way of thinking, doing projects and teaching is looking at, understanding and referring to the world around and making decisions based on that understanding. Every decision in the project are based on how we see, understand and refer to. And it's our way of trying to avoid the conservatism or the dogmatism that is like nowadays dominating the discourse and the practice of architecture. We will be visiting gardens composed of fragments and pieces taken from different origins, and we are going to talk about architecture today, talking about flowers, today ornaments. There are many ornaments, people, cosmologies, of course, vision and structural behavior, third natures, and AMID, as you explained. AMID, that means in between, or surrounded by, or connected with. So it's really meaningful from many points of view in our work and our way of working. I'll start with this project, that is the Institución Libre de Enseñanza. We normally try to translate it as Free Institution for Education. It's not a good translation, but you can think it's very similar to the Montessori, not the same thing, but a similar way of Montessori teaching. That was a winning entry. And in this project, as in many other projects, when we project, as I said, we try to be aware of the world around, but we always think that architecture is not a single self-referential object or a building. So it's understood as something that is a complex set of connections, and this one is one of those, with many other entities. And we will be developing these ideas along the lecture. Also, is a small cosmology. Small because this is not that big in scale, but it's a small cosmology. Just few things, because some of you know a bit about this, but few things that are important for us. Institución Libre de Enseñanza was set up in the 19th century, in 1876. And it was a constantly evolving experimental laboratory for new teaching, and it was driven by persons, people like that, professors. In the middle is Giner de los Ríos, and the founder. And they were evicted from the university because they were pleading for academic freedom. Academic freedom, that is a lot. And they proposed to work teaching to children. That's why Montessori and Giner de los Ríos Foundation has a connection. They were also very connected with all these generations, like Salvador Dalí. Connected meaning that the institution where these people were just learning, it was also in relationship with the former pavilions and the former space of the old institution. So they were learning in there. As I said, Federico García Lorca, Juan Ramón Jiménez, Luis Buñuel, Antonio Machado, Nobel Prizes, several Nobel Prizes in Spain, they were very much in connection. Then the historical place was taken by the dictator troops, so by Franco, and in 1939, when the war was finishing, he ensured that the archive and the library, everything was burned, everything was destroyed. He destroyed the garden, of course. So there were only few remaining documents after this happened. Then, well, there was a long history of coming back and forth. After he passed away, Franco passed away, the family of the descendants and the disciples recovered the old site, only the site, nothing more. And for us, that was the question. This project, what is interesting in
It's
all
where
the process,
mouse is now.
in all the process, is there were not physical remainings. There was a clear memory of a way of thinking, a way of teaching, a way of understanding or sharing, just the understanding not only of the education, but also a way of living. And how we, as architects, can bring back everything to a contemporary moment. Thinking about General de los Ríos, that had a very contemporary way of thinking, so it was not just because we are in 2000. And how this can be translated into architecture and spaces. No, that was the main work. We will try to deliver and explain later. This is the old place already with the project in there.
So maybe you don't know this, but this institution was really important in the Spanish history and the Spanish culture. So it's something fundamental to the modernity of Spain at that time, but also the way it evolved after the democracy was resumed. So it's a very special place that was destroyed. And the competition was about recovering the identity of the place. So you could imagine that when we received the brief, the first thing that we did was throw in the papers directly to the wastebasket. So because we were paralyzed and we cannot do this. So it was a big challenge, basically. But we discovered at a certain point that, and it was funny because we all know in our home city that these people are very special. The people that was educated in that institution and the people that was educated under the guidance of the disciples that were taught in there, they were really very special people. You could distinguish almost how someone coming from there based on the way of speaking and explaining things. So they were like really special people. And then there was a spark, coming to us, like saying, "Oh, maybe that is a possibility for us to enter into this competition." We submit the competition, we were accepted, it was a restricted one, and a long history started. But let us start by saying that the notion of a space, which is something that you will see in most of the projects, is a crucial aspect for us. In our own terminology, in our own world, I would say it could be defined as a complex interwoven network of interrelationships. So we always look at the space as something which is having a physical boundaries and is defined by walls, by ceilings, by floorings, by all these physical elements. But we would like to think about it, or we usually think about it like a place where an immense amount of interactions between different agents happen. So it's the situation where few people, but it would be completely different this moment. This space, if we would be like many more, or it could be a different setup of the room, or we would be interacting with each other. So that hopefully will happen afterwards. It's just for us also can be understood as a gigantic library of different things being connected one another. Not only physically, but also virtually. And that's something we'll try to explain. So it's something that in the weekends in Hong Kong happens with this Filipino housekeeper when they're going out in their free day and occupying the places and the walkways, elevated walkways around the Norman Foster building in there, trying to have this kind of small meetings. So is in a way this notion of a space is opposed to a purely passive notion of receiving a space, and obviously it is in a space in which many other individuals, many other biotic and not biotic entities interact we'll try to explain. It sounds complex, but it's not. It's simply something that we do every day, in everyday basis. And then coming back to Ginor de los Ríos, this guy in here, we understood that the context, something that is something for architects, something to be referring to or to work with, more than being associated with a physical, the physical surroundings for the buildings or for interventions, could be more related with a group of people. That was simply a discovery, something that came to our mind saying, oh, these people are so special that maybe we can try to base the project on how they were behaving back at that time, and how they were having a relationship with their material world, their objects, their relationship with technology, the way they used to work, to even dress, and everything that surrounded this world, this fantastical world, this really crazy world of the Institución Libre de Enseñanza. So then, if the space is based on this level of interaction between different actors, so it would be fundamental to ask ourselves who these actors are. No? So that was the very first question that came into our mind, and it still is the basic thing in most of our work. But let us say also as an introduction to the work that you will be seeing that as architects, as a discipline also, architecture has been having great difficulties to identify and to characterize ourselves, humans, within architecture. So we are giving ourselves names such as clients, such as people, audience, citizens, public, and so on. That is just simply referring to a problem that we are not capable to see ourselves, categorize ourselves, and work with, our culture as well as something fundamental for an architectural project. So, simultaneously to the development of this project, we won the competition. We were the only young guys doing that back at that time, so it was an enormous surprise, nothing to do with this institution. None of us studied there, so it was like, wow, surprise. But we still wanted to develop the project further, so we started to simultaneously develop projects in which this notion of being related with a group of individuals, so something that we could call a subculture, could be a fundamental way of understanding how the decisions in architecture could be made. Such as this one that we finally call it Gay Vatican. Back at that time, it was like 2011, in which basically most of the decisions could be made in relationship with a group of individuals and intentional community. Or this one that we made in collaboration with Susa Peter. That is basically the memorial recently done. So also trying to work with these ideas is a memorial to the Holocaust to the Roma and Sinti minorities in Bohemia. Being one of the few formalized spaces dedicated to Roma, to the so-called gypsies communities and their history, we wanted to propose a strong and strongly based repository for culturally and symbolically charged signs for both communities. How to do that? So that was the first thing. So it's just simply taking a radically abstract and totally renewed way of dealing with that. It's not simply a collage of references on cultural things put together, but it's something that deals with their own culture, but in subtle ways. No? So it's composed by a series of actions at the scale of the landscape. This is a tiny model that we made for the competition. That is composed by a series of actions related with the landscape. We proposed a ritual as well, and we proposed a circle and a cross memorial. We'll see it now very quickly. So basically what we propose is intersecting paths linking into the entrance of the concentration camp, the burial grounds, and other crucial spaces in the surrounding of this place. As the beginning of the foundation, the certain paths crossing as a reference of the foundation of a city or foundation of a place, but also associated with the nomadic origins of Roma culture, and particularly to the Czech Sinti, which is always referred to the nomadic culture and the way they understand, paths as something to be followed. So it is a lot of, there is a lot of interesting things. It's also related with the, well, first semester work that we did at the Ankevante, no, in the Studio One. But we proposed also a spaces for the memorial, like a gigantic black circular a crater of 80 meters diameter, slightly elevated from the surrounding ground, and that would be raised from the ground around and constructing a concave and immersive black crater. That one and the smaller circle that you saw on the top, we proposed a visitor center that is a non-sighted black abysm with no flat horizontal floor that is based on an immersive experience, you know, almost means subjected to the outdoor weather constantly. So through projects like this, we started to understand back at that time when we won the competition that speculating how to speculate about how to translate into formal material organizational decisions those topics and those specific things related with the specific cultures and specific individuals. Because we believe that contemporary and alternative ways of living are extremely interesting, and for us, ways of life are one of the most intense and genuine products of our own cultures. So they constitute at the time a record and a critique of our societies, and are many times an attempt to build up alternative, you know, to the codes, customs, and dominant material worlds that are surrounding us usually.
Now we are coming back to the question about bringing the contemporary way of thinking of Giner de los Ríos and thinking about how to translate it. And this is our project under construction, and we are also developing this project with Susa. Better, we will have to ask her no. So this is under construction. And in 2020, we received a commission to reconstruct, refurbish, and add a new penthouse to this building. When we came here, we thought in Vienna, where the penthouses have all the freedom, at least till not that long ago, you have a lot of freedom to do things. In Barcelona, is really impossible. It's very difficult.
It's very difficult.
So this is Casa Llorens. It's a modernist building, as you can see. It was constructed in early 20th century, 1903, 07, 67, and it is in the example very close to Sagrada Familia.
In the very city center with a lot of obviously real estate value.
And then the question
really
is,
expensive place.
Yeah, super expensive place. We won't talk about the money by now. This is the situation. This is
the current state, like it is now.
Current. But this was the building, and the upper part, the whole upper part, was destroyed. Now nobody knows what happened.
How and why.
Everyone, all of us think that it was the Civil War, but there are no. And there is only one picture. This picture. Well, not this picture. It's a 6x9
this
only.
big.
Only. So the reconstruction is not so easy just to, with this picture, imagine every single thing. So we have to invent the ways of reconstructing the project. And, well, also the way of constructing a penthouse that could deal with the languages, the ornaments, but also being contemporary. This is the interior. You can see the frescoes and everything is, well, this is a render of the interior after refurbishment. It's very similar, it's not that bad. Well, this is the early stages of recovering. Basically, the complexity is based on, we have one picture, the drawings done by the architect, Josep Pérez y Terraza, who passed away before the building was finished. So someone finished and didn't follow the drawings. So the drawings are not, we can use them. But we are learning a lot about the way of drawing ornaments. But we have to get many things in the little picture. But also we have a set of buildings in Barcelona that he did, Josep Pérez y Terraza. So we are also scanning ornaments that are similar in order to do this process that has been, and it is endless. First, geometry, accurate geometry in 2D, then translation into 3D, then the translation into 3D it has been manipulated as using fingers to then print in 3D, different scales, 1 to 20, 1 to 10, 1 to 5, 1 to 2. Now we are printing in 1 to 1. And the idea, and this is work under construction, the idea is to really think about how the 3D printing could be part of the final construction. We know that this is going to be kind of polemic, because returning to the original building state and bringing it back to the city, which is against, we were talking about this today, no? It's against the 1931 Athens chart.
Totally
it was
against.
totally
It's
against.
like inconceivable.
So we know that there is a polemic, but it's our target. And it could be, would like to consider a high resolution facsimile of the previously existing building. And well, by now, under construction, as you said, and it's not going to be a mimetic restitution, or at least we don't want to.
It's something important to also, in this case, is the only possibility for the extension and renovation works to happen was to reconstruct this thing. So the turrets and the ornaments and everything else. So the target is how to make it in a completely contemporary way, so that at a certain distance you see what it was in the picture, but in a closer you distinguish what it was new, classical, but completely in a renewed way. So the thing would be how to really deal with the possibility of this thing to be done anew, but taking transforming the ornaments and also into contemporary versions of them. A very complicated and subtle thing, because we need. So we were speaking with Hannes, Trotman now, that you need to deal with the committees, with the architect committee, with the ensemble committee, with all these boards, and convince them that what you're doing is valuable, makes sense, and is for the city to recover a really important corner existing back at that time. No?
Just few new, data. The geometry taken or done for the penthouse, these marvelous drawings done by Susa, is also trying to have a language that is speaking with the old language, but learning from Antonio Gaudí and all the things that he used to do in the projects, like the Casa Well, but your house also, where he used to construct these masks, so big masks to cover the back parts, and also he used to work constructing these masks with ceramics, with shiny ceramics. And that's why we are proposing to construct something contemporary using the masks and the shiny ceramics in the tradition of Barcelona. This, we are I don't know if you know Toni Comella, he's a marvelous ceramist in Barcelona. We are developing the ceramics with him, and is in a process of development. But you can see in here how they flicker, and some patterns also just under development for the ceramics. The same geometry is brought to the interior of the apartment. So the same way of constructing the interior of the apartment follows this geometry. You can see the walls and the inner partitions and the different rooms. Let's see how it finishes, but hopefully a contemporary penthouse on top of this modernist building will happen, and we will come back to maybe share it with you. I don't know how many years. I cannot promise less than 5.
But coming back to General de los Ríos, there was a very interesting problem in there that we tried to explain. That is how to, in a way, connote in architecture, so how to make connotations in architecture without direct allusion, without direct metaphors, how to design in a way in architecture that could be related with that material culture of particular people, and with things outside architecture without, falling into banal associations. No, that is something really important, so that you can inscribe within decisions different levels of reading. So how you see things thoroughly, but also if you're like someone that has been in connection with these people, you start to recognize certain patterns and certain things that are meaningful for yourself. So how to inscribe within architecture different levels of meaning and reading that could be associated with this world of different cultures. That problem was like a big one for us, but thanks God that we were teaching at certain point landscape architecture, because we were really interested in that at a certain time. So we spent a couple of years doing that, and one of the texts that were fundamental for us was written by Ginard de los Ríos, the founder of the institution. And surprisingly, we found a possible connection in Ginard de los Ríos himself, his notion of landscape that was really advanced for that time. So it was really a proto-ecological one back in 19th century, because he was a follower of Alexander von Humboldt. Basically, his brother was the one translating to Spanish Humboldt's texts. So he was really into that, and he had a really great idea, or a fantastic idea, how landscape is really connected with cultures, and how these both notions evolve a long time. So the notion of of the contemporary approach to landscape by Ginard de los Ríos was fundamental for us. He was looking for the first time ever to this to the beauty of these landscapes. This is the Castilian Plateau, nothing to do with a green, gorgeous nature. No, it's just golden, sad, in a way, a landscape of barren, beautiness. That he was finding fundamental. And after himself, there were like many poets, many writers, many painters taking these ideas of how to approach landscape and to translate it into works of art, and starting looking at this kind of exchange wall of almost, non-alive natures as something that was fundamental for the Spanish culture. So for him also, that was something really nice for us to learn. He was teaching students to be in direct contact with things, learning from them directly. So there were no textbooks in the school. So there were nothing that was written by someone else. So the students were in charge of writing down the textbooks for themselves and for their mates. So investigating in libraries outside the school. So I'm talking about 9 years old kind of guys, that were like taking the time and the patience to write down these things. So basically, what we suddenly decided is that it's an inversion, I would say. So putting upside down the targets of the competition that were like obviously dealing with a building, in a tiny plot, 2,000, well, not that tiny, but not very big, 1,000 square meters, having a building of 5,000 square meters. So the target was doing that project, but we said, okay, forget about the building, we'll define what the garden is about. And the building will be just the background that defines this garden. This small ecology resembling Francisco Ginard de los Ríos ecologies, that he was very much into that. No? So basically, we selected different densities, locations, rhythms of road to foster an anarchic, what ecologists call anarchic distribution of resources among plants and species. So the garden is constructed by a series of alive and inanimate layers that are constructing this kind of sense of wilderness within this garden, in the very center of Madrid. So starting with a dense part on the bottom part in the south part of the plot, and transitioning to a vertical garden on the north, on the top part, when the garden ends, and we'll discover now why is that. No? But in order to recreate the sullen, stern, and hostile beauty of the Castilian Plateau that we were seeing before in wintertime, the garden had to be deciduous as well. So, and the mid-sized plants, and it needed to be pruned as well, to facilitate, the verticality of the sprouts going up. It is basically a fragment of artificially constructed ecology. I mean, it's wild because it seems barely maintained, so there is no maintenance to it, and not that easily understandable. So you don't read any geometry to it. It's somehow a fragment of artificially constructed ecology. So if you go there, you will see how it is reproducing, because there was no, and something that I forgot to mention, there was no record of how the original garden was like set up. But it was really important. And neither the species and the distribution of the species were like somehow described. So if you go nowadays in there, you will be seeing even bigger plants that follow a geometry as well that is embedded within the plantation grids. And as the plateau for Giner de los Ríos is not green except for a few weeks, so next week that will be suffering 40 something in Madrid will be already golden and silver, not anymore green. No, that is, how our ecology is around Madrid, the capital city of Spain, look like. Basically, this conventional thing, but it's really important also for the garden that is evolving a long time, and how the succession of species are happening. And then, for us, and it was a discovery that happened way before this competition, a couple of years before, it happened that it was clear for us that space is also something that we share with other species, that is constructed by our coexistence with other beings around ourselves, not with other also subcultures or other ways of life, but also other species. So we started to ask ourselves, also in parallel, to developing this more, I would say, related to construction projects. We started to define a project that could be dealing with this question of who are the actors, how to characterize them. So not only taking humans as part of this spatial understanding, but also other species.
Even though we are going to talk about the project that we did last year, we always come back to this one. Every single lecture, I think, is in here with us. Because it was really long ago, 2002, when we did the first attempt to think about these situations of the role of environments of synthetic nature that could facilitate a direct and horizontal relationship among the different species. No, Efren has been explaining humans, animals, everything together. And we proposed to cover within a live membrane this ecosystem mask we call for Ames Thermal Power Station in Iowa.
In the States.
In the States. So 20 years after, we are still talking about it. But the connection in here, we did this video, we were talking with Hannes about how old the video is already, but we did this video to explain the membrane that covers the thermal power station. Why is this here today? Because we have been doing a new attempt, or we tried at least to do a new attempt of covering an existing building. We were invited to a competition here in Vienna last year, 2021. By the company Bean Energy. We did, we received the brief saying, okay, we can finally do this project. It's our possibility. But the regulations were so restrictive that it was not possible to use a live still. Yeah. Still, we thought, why don't we try to really bring back some of those ideas to the project? And this is the proposal.
So it's basically building upon this notion of architecture being a shared space with other species, a space of coexistence, but in a completely different way. So this was a facade. So the brief was weird because it was a facade for a rotary kiln, the new one that it will be constructed by Bean Energy. So it was about beautifying already beautiful infrastructural buildings, such as kilns, deposits, storage facilities, and this kind of thing. So similar to the previous project, what we proposed wraps around different buildings and machines and things, to just for a couple of reasons. One was economy. It was simply cheaper to wrap around different volumes than wrapping around each of them independently. but also because it was also the possibility of starting playing with the things that could be giving a different character to the facade itself. So it is attached to the upper one, and it is slightly moving and increasingly growing in size. No? The layers that are forming the facade are formed by the 5 different folded D-stamped carved metal pieces measuring 70 centimeters by 20, so 220 centimeters, and they're halfway between a car door and a vegetable leaf. No, something in between. No,
it was there.
It was there. So it was like simply this idea of, yeah, we cannot do that because it's forbidden by the brief itself. It was like a surprise, but something that could be also transformed into a system that vaguely refers to an apparently woven fabric made out of vegetable materials. No? That was the basic idea. That turn into this. So, and also the back of the panels are tinted with a yellowish golden coating that will be subtly reflecting and tinting, the panels themselves. So every single panel is like really transitioning in a gradient between the color of the sky being reflected, no? Because it will be turning around, and this golden tiny tinted effect that also follows the Viennese tradition of golden foliage-based architectural elements. No? Something that is nice, subtle enough to emphasize as well, and to for these infrastructural buildings to become a urban civic architecture, a proper one, by turning them into public artifacts that convey values of a society which is intensely committed to a sustainable future for all species, but also related with high technical incineration processes that are happening within inside. No? That we wanted this to be really technically very sophisticatedly done. So basically, they're speaking about this condition that we wanted to recover as well. So maybe it's more obvious now why we, at a certain point, we were interested in this term, third natures, that comes from a, sorry about that, it's like a long history of the term, but goes back to the 16th century and was coined by a priest, Jacopo Bonfario, that was trying to describe with the new Renaissance gardens the condition of those spaces. So, and he needed to find a new term. So second nature is, first nature is the untouched nature, like it is, no, the wild one with no human interaction. Second nature was this defined by CERO9 as that artificial manipulations of nature for practical reasons such as agriculture, and he was defining this third nature as something which is obviously, as all gardens are, artificially defined, made out of natural and alive materials, but also that are culturally constructed and received. Remember that in Renaissance gardens, the history behind them, so the stories also and the connections related with classical mythology and meanings embedded in every single decision, how things were arranged, how water was running, were super important. So it was really a legible text that people that were literate on that, on classical culture, was capable to read meaningfully. So that idea of something which is having this material condition, but also is related with a culture and gets back also to certain different levels of reading, was super fundamental. We won't talk about these things because people that is already around in here know very well why we are so obsessed with this text that I was in the image for several seconds. But basically, also, and in relationship with that, because also, as probably our team knows a little bit, we also are using gardens and the idea of gardens as a counterpoint for architecture. So in gardens, for example, one of the things that we also continuously refer to is that gardens you cannot associate biunivocally two functions directly. So what is a garden for? So you cannot inscribe programs to them. No? It's simply they're resisting by themselves being categorized throughout function. No? In fact, they're meant to be these contemplation spaces. No? So the opposed to purely production and purely activities related with functional approaches. Basically, That's why, for us, spatial configurations of a very particular and very simple nature could be really powerful, and you find that in gardens. So how spaces are related with each other in very simple ways that are so resilient and so powerful that themselves, by themselves, are capable to generate projects.
This is the original of the old Institución Libre de Enseñanza, and the spatial configuration was based on little spaces, little classrooms, little pavilions around one garden. The question about translation of spatial organization and programs or activities or actions was also part of the brief or the client, because they came to us saying, okay, we know that we want to do this project about how we are bringing back the ideas of teaching other teachers to teach and how the knowledge can be shared. We don't know the program. We don't know if we want classrooms or libraries. We don't know if we want archives or dining rooms. We want to think about how we could do a project where spaces could be really freely used for an interchange of knowledge. So that was a great way of starting proposing this set of pavilions
And rooms.
fragmented pavilions around a garden and connected in the back part in a way that is one building. Of course, pragmatic things like electricity and these kind of things are not good if you fragment every single thing. So that's why we made this decision about breaking as much as possible the building around the garden, but still connecting it using this spatial organization, as Efren was saying. Then the classrooms, as you can see, they have different sizes, different dimensions, different proportion in a way that are giving freedom for the teachers. They are starting to use it now, and is kind of very successful, because they are giving a lot of freedom to just interchange knowledge. And also the system of layers, so the external layer, the garden, then the lattice, then the columns, then the curtains, the different curtains, the one that is almost transparent and the one that is super dark, is also permitting this very flexible, very flexible way of using the space. And not only the classrooms, but also the spaces in between the corridors. So they are big enough to spend time also outside, as you can see. And down, a very similar notion of the different rooms, but in a different way, is the auditorium, because it's different rooms looking to one stage. So you can see how the translation in the excavated auditorium has been done in a way that, yes, these rooms can be directed to the stage. This is the auditorium. It's very tiny, and it's not the video is one effect of making it bigger, but when you go there, it's really like the perception is bigger because everything is very continuous, and the chairs are a bit smaller than normal, and it works very nicely with people. Yeah. I think that this one, we can go directly to the vision. I think, no, because it's connecting very well here. So yes, vision. I said we are going to talk about vision and how human beings watch
and see things. No? And this was another experiment that happened in there. So because these people were really interested in this relationship with science. So the lattice was an experiment related with this idea how we humans see and perceive depth. So basically, it is based on the ideas of someone really close connected with the institution itself, who was a Nobel Prize receiver. It's called Santiago Ramón y Cajal. If you don't know his drawings, have a look to them because they're unbelievable.
the neurons.
He's the father of the modern neurobiology, literally, and he was educated in this place. And he was like also discovering basically how the vision works in the chiasma that all the mammals have. So that is where the nerves, the optical nerves, cross one each other, and how the information flows from one eye to the brain, and how vision is constructed. He discovered that very early on when he was very young, and he described it. And it's based on this idea that when this information is crossed, so you can have individual inputs from every eye, and the brain basically distinguishes where things are, and then in a process called optical confusion, that is basically the deletion of part of information that is getting to the brain, you're constructing an area where things are focused, and out of this area, things are seen in a double vision. Try, because we used to play one was the first thing that when we met firstly, we were like exchanging, that is this play of putting something of a certain size and closing your eyes, alternatively. Certain things disappear. And that's what we try to do with the lattice. Because of the distance of the perceiver, which is very controlled within these spaces, and the optical predominance of the exterior, which is more lightened, so you tend to focus your eyes on the exterior, and then the lattice, because of the size of the bars. So this cannot be photographed. I'm sorry, you won't see that. But in there, whenever you are in the classrooms or in the spaces, the lattice disappears, and the effect that you get is something similar to a rainy day, basically. That is reproducing this sense of concentration, because there are elongated drops, basically elongated bars that are transparent to your eyes. Still there, but you see in a blurry perception thing. So basically the interior of the classrooms is instantly connected with the greenery outside, even though from the exterior are perceived as solid, almost impenetrable volumes. So basically the lattice is just a lot of effort to make this possible, So no frameworks, nothing that could be disturbing this effect. So it's composed by 3 layers that are well one each other, so you're not seeing anything that could be disturbing this effect. And it's just simply, basically 2 exterior bars, really thin, put together with the spaces with an inner one. So it's basically a version of a foundation wall reinforcement, but no corrugation on it. So the cheapest we could get, basically, to get that effect possible.
I always say this: 1,200 euros a square meter.
The overall.
We promised that it was not expensive, even though
could look, but it's like it's cheap even for Spain, no? The construction cost, and this lattice cost literally nothing, because we invented a system through which unskilled people could be doing it with not that much effort. So it was possible to make this kind of real effect that is changing, and also produces 2 effects in the interior. One is that it's blocking sun radiation, which is really important in Spain in summer. Another is reflecting light. So the interiors are bathed by a light which is coming from everywhere, which is something uncommon there, because the light is very strong. We're really close, as in Vienna partially, we're really close to a mountain range with plenty of snow in winter. So the light tends to be really, really strong in the interior, and then this lattice diffuses the light and is reflected everywhere, in the floors, in the ceilings, in the back walls, to create an effect of flotation, basically.
And this is the opposite effect.
And this is the opposite.
It's very nice.
When the optical predominance is the other way around, is because the interiors are light, and this becomes transparent suddenly.
Very fast, I'm going to talk about 2 projects where we were working with the vision, and the vision and perceived tectonics. That was the main strategy in those 2 projects, in archaeological visitor centers, one in Clunia, Suspicia, and the other one it is in Lancia, 2 just archaeological sites, and those are the entrance. So the horizontal landscape in these 2 projects was constructed by, first, parallel concrete cell beams that permit panoramic view of the plateau, and then an intersection with the visual cone define the entrance of the archaeological site, and then another rooms that cross from side to side with another concrete ball that serves as the support for all the shell beams. So it is not only the vision, but also the structural behavior that constructs the way of having this construction of the vision in relationship with the landscape.
The surrounding landscape.
Linked again with Giner de los Ríos, because the main work that we did, and today we were discussing how many physical buildings we did,
Models.
models we did in the office, to look at the different diagonals and corners to end up constructing this. We have this drawing that we have to say that came afterwards, of course, but it was the way of working, because we were looking all the time about how, when you are walking, you are watching certain parts and you are discovering different diagonals, and how you follow the yes path. No?
So basically it's the idea of giving shape and forming the volumes and the pavilions with your sight while walking. You know, a classical that comes from English landscape architecture, that in this case was like used to be really defining like in a natural canyon, you know, how things you don't see the exit, you don't see the end of a space, that you're like always trying to get to know how the space will end. So multiplying the size of the place by many times, basically.
So basically, and just to finish, the last pics, no, is like entering from the urban scale. So on the one hand, the building, in this case, is a building appears with a urban scale in the main street, while you enter through a very narrow corridor between the former house of Giner de los Ríos. He used to live in that house. So very narrow corridor to start discovering the views with your eyes and the diagonals. So that you turn in the east, the S, you explained that the S is the longest path possible, no? To have a perception that makes the space bigger, but it's tiny. It's a tiny garden. And nowadays it's very exuberant. Not even in this moment, it was like 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
So it's very exuberant, and you cannot see, hardly you can see a piece of building. And then there are always only fragments. It's difficult to realize that this is a one building. And then this is the final part where the auditorium is excavated, and you can go down and discover the hidden auditorium. The auditorium is excavated. We didn't explain it, but you can continue, because it's the biggest space in terms of square meters in the site. So the only way to have a garden was hiding it, no, like excavating.
So there are other. This is the building just recently completed, with the garden just planted. But the basic idea also was like to have on the middle of the height this edge, so perceptibly the building gets smaller, and also reducing the size and the apparent size of the volumes and the pavilions, but also inclining the surfaces, so the upper one is reflecting the sky and the bottom one is reflecting the greenery and the and the ground. So you could be there, you will be clearly tinted, you know, the galvanized lattice with these two colors, no, that are changing completely the perception and getting the building quite smaller. So in a way, it refuses to be seen as a whole. So you don't see it as one of the tricks of this building. You don't see the building as a whole, never ever. So you don't see once what the building is. You see just fragments of things, and you don't see a building itself, but a series of small pavilions surrounding a garden. Okay, so we'll close this chat today with just saying that by spending time with these notions and partially related with this idea of third nature, but also the coexisting with other species and with different beings, with other also cultures, working with vision and the possibility of redescribing the world around by, in a way, inscribing within a building and within architectural decisions a particular way of looking at the world around that these people were having. We understood that our obsessions with the multi-layer readings of architecture and with the project as a form of knowledge were an attempt of describing micro and alternative worlds. So to speak, cosmologies, as these self-contained microcosmos, and that could reflect a particular understanding of the world. In doing so, this microcosmos, in our understanding, could provide a small-scale alternative to the social and spatial orderings that are usual nowadays, in the same way that the gardens and pavilions of the original institution were doing during 60 years before or until the arrival of the Spanish Civil War. Thank you very much for listening to us, but also this understanding is proposing, in other words, alternative notions of beauty that are based on a direct and deep appreciation of understanding of the world around, also thinking that the way we construct a space is by these definitions, mingled with, amongst, conjoined with others. Thank you.
We are happy to have a conversation, and it
Maybe
has been
now,
super
maybe
comfortable and very nice to be with people again. It makes so different. All the Zoom that we have done.
Thank you very much for the beautiful lecture. I think it's really amazing the depth and the festive spirit you bring to every new detail of the project. You mentioned this word, I found it in one of the texts in the El Croquis, that you try to bring a festive spirit to any new project or any detail. And I think we could see that really very clearly in the lecture. So
we can talk with the wine.
Yeah. So then let's, if there are there are some people who want to talk to you. So I give the microphone to Marie.
Well, again, I want to thank you in name of our club of Zentralvereinigung. I have had the chance to see your lecture many years ago at Schillerplatz, so I'm just congratulating how the growth and the evolvement is in your body of work. However, I'd just like to use some moment to ask you, as you're here, it's a big chance. I think it's quite important for our country to look at Europe and to look at contemporary European statements in culture. In your work, I see a very different attitude in combining, in my mind now, the interiors and the exteriors. It's not about construction in your lecture, it's about a very interesting contact of the public and the private, what you called with the AMID, yeah? So I would like to know a bit more about your studio and how many people you are, and how do you manage to keep the poetry of these images, because this lecture was like a flood of photos and films. How many you are in your studio?
Well, not that many. And something that happened to us is at a certain point we were growing and growing and growing. I think it was like 2005, 2006. And we were about 20 in the office. And there was one day that we sit watching each other and say, we don't want this, right? Because we didn't want to spend our life managing people, managing construction sites. So we were like going like this, no? So, and it was like a suicide, I have to admit, no? Because we were plenty of things or works and commissions, we decided to put everything aside. And we said to ourselves, listen, so we don't want to be, not a conventional, because I believe that there are a lot of interest in doing many different kinds of architecture through many different ways, no? But it was a moment, it was simply too much. So our time was taken by meetings, by construction site visits, we were like, no. And we stopped. And since then, the maximum number of people we had is like 5, 6, 8 sometimes.
Perfect number.
But it's a tiny number.
But there are other problems. I mean, the crisis arrived.
We made a decision, and the crisis followed
commit.
just afterwards.
Yeah.
Everything
Well, but
in
you never
Spain
know.
was
Yes, of
stopped.
course. Well, we are aware that Spain had a very difficult time. We are aware of that.
Yeah.
But still, the quality of the interior of the lecture hall, it is so inspiring to see how you manage to mass it. As you said, it's maybe it's a small auditorium, but still, when you consider the garden concept and the lecture hall concept in one project, it's of high refinement. And so I wanted just to know more if you have people in your studio concerning with interior architecture, or where are the people coming from you work with?
Well,
The inspiration, it's
Yeah.
all about the fantasy.
I think we were really lucky in Spain back in that time. So things have changed a bit, but we were lucky because we were a generation. The people of our age are brilliant people, I must say. So we have one of the best, landscape designers who is a professor nowadays in the TH. We had a really amazing structural engineer who was like of our very same age. We were 30 years old doing things. So we were a brilliant generation. Nowadays, most of them are abroad, are everywhere else, not anymore in Spain. But we were like really having really working mates who were of our age, really talented in all things. So we were, the group that we were having back in that time was simply great.
And also the length, the amount of time that we spent, the architecture has these lives that could be 10 years, 20 or 30. And there were many problems with the license, the license to get the approvals
permits,
for construction. It was so long that we personally had a lot of time to enter in many, many details. So good pros and cons of timings in the offices.
Something that we're asking for to every single client who could be potentially interested in working with us is that we don't have, we're not obliged to due dates. So it's almost the very first time. So things take time. So I know that it's a suicidal act nowadays, but we say, listen, this will take us that time. Maybe you will get it sooner, but it's simply, that, it is an old story by us, but we had an old professor that was teaching us that was capable to calculate the amount of hours needed for a certain quality for every single project, depending on the size. It was funny enough, but we believe in that. There is a time needed to do certain things.
Thank you.